Welcome to Loving Beyond the I Do podcast. This power couple is building stronger marriages one day at a time. Talking about real issues on love, relationships, and marriage longevity. Let's break down the barriers and engage in healthy conversation with your hosts, Jason and Tina Marie. Take a seat and buckle up because things are about to get real. Hey, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Loving Beyond the I Do podcast.
With your hosts, Jason and Tina Marie.
I don't know how many there are of us, but I guess there's a lot. So this week we have a special guest in the studio with us.
Yes, we have Elizabeth Polinsky.
Welcome, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we are excited to having you as well. Thank you for being our guest.
Yes. So, Elizabeth, I guess from this point we'll just call her Liz since we're old friends. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Liz, tell our audience a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, I'm a marriage counselor, and I'm in Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm also the host of the Communicate and Connect podcast for military relationships, since military couples is really what I specialize in.
Okay, so what made you go into the military couples?
Oh, wow. Well, so I'm a Navy brat, so we'll start with that.
Okay.
Both my parents were Navy, so they were a dual military couple.
Okay.
And for generations in my family back, we've got military, mostly Navy, but some people, branched out and then
went rogue somewhere else, right?
And then my husband is Navy. And so I've just always really had a passion for working with the military. Even before I met my husband, I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I just really have a passion for working with military and veteran couples.
So you say working with the military, but working with the military is a little different than working with the military couple. So what made you zone in on couples, not necessarily kids or just families?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So I think it's first stemmed with my work at the VA, because so many veterans that I had worked with had gone through divorces, multiple marriages that had ended. They maybe have kids from different marriages, and a lot of them talked about how the decline of their relationships while they were in the military really contributed to their mental health problems that they were experiencing. So I thought, well, maybe I can help prevent some of that.
Okay. The naive part. I'm young. I want to help everyone. Okay. No, I mean it in a good sense, though.
Right.
I mean,
you see a need and you want to help.
Right. I mean, it in a good sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the research says that it trickles down. So if my marriage is positive, it trickles down to my kids. Whereas if my marriage is kind of on the rocks, that also trickles down to my kids. So by helping a couple be solid together, I'm helping the entire family.
So how was your parents? Was it, so even with working with the veterans, was it something that was a little bit further back?
Or something that you might have saw that triggered to say, I want to change this in other family dynamics.
Right, or even in mine.
Yeah.
Seeing your own parents.
Yeah, so my parents divorced when I was really young.
Okay.
And my dad is one of those veterans with multiple marriages and multiple divorces. And that has been hard to see. So there is a very personal component that has impacted my life from it, for sure.
So did it give you, when you, through the years growing up and knowing that your dad had previous marriages, did you think that it would ever impact your marriage or how you view marriage in the future?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In a scary way, actually, because people who come from divorced families are statistically more likely to be divorced. And that is terrifying to me personally.
Right.
I really, I understand. I can. There are a lot of good reasons for divorce, and
Yes.
I don't think I think divorce is the right option for a lot of couples at different times, and they can go on to have really fulfilling second marriages and so on and so forth. I just know that for me personally, I really wanted to be very intentional about picking a partner the first go around and try to minimize the risk, knowing that myself I'm at an increased risk for divorce.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So what about your husband's parents? Did you, when picking a partner, did you put
Mhm.
that into the equation?
I'm no, not so much that. His parents are separated. Um, they're technically not divorced, but I don't they're not together and haven't been. So
They're in that gray area, right?
She's like, she's thinking, she doesn't want to say,
Right.
she's like,
It's like,
I don't
they're
get
kinda-
it. Like they're not
they're
together.
kind of that low area.
yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, but that was not as big of a concern for me. I know my husband has a lot of strengths
Okay.
um that make him a good partner. And I think it had more to do with how he felt secure in his relationships with his parents that mattered more to me. So this kind of goes into attachment styles.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you talked about that before? Or are you
No,
familiar
so if
No,
you
with
want
it?
that'd be
to, go
perfect,
ahead.
yes.
We'll just zoom us
Okay.
right in.
A
So
perfect lead in.
so
Okay.
now we're gonna go into this whole your arena of how you think in couples and things like that. So go ahead.
Yes, yeah. So okay, science lesson.
All right,
This is
science
now,
101.
now this is the relationship science, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, relationship science. So, relationships are based on attachments. So this is sort of a evolutionary concept that we need to attach to significant others in order to survive.
Okay.
Being in a group and having connections will help me not get killed by a warring tribe or eaten by a tiger type of thing.
Okay.
And so the first people that we connect with are our parents. And if they are consistently feeding us, there for us when we cry, helping us with our emotional needs, then that tells me that I have value and that I can count on people to be there for me. And so I develop a sense of security knowing that I can really count on someone else. And that is something that I think my husband got from his family.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas me, on the other hand,
You could have been
I
eaten.
didn't quite get that. I didn't get that in the same way. I have
Okay.
wonderful parents, and they
Right.
are great. You know,
They did the best
Um,
they could do.
yes,
Absolutely.
yeah, and but for whatever reason, sometimes parents are not able to meet their kids' needs, and that can happen for really good reasons. It doesn't make them bad parents, but
Absolutely.
on the child side, they can get the message that I'm either not valuable or I can't count on someone to be there for me. And then they develop an insecure style. And there are a few different types of insecure styles, but at the core of it, it just means I'm not sure I can really trust intimate relationships. And so for me, it was more important to find somebody who had a more secure attachment style, um, because someone who has a secure attachment style can actually help somebody who's insecure feel more secure.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and the work that I do in couples therapy is about helping couples feel secure together, even if both of them had an insecure attachment style growing up.
So when you're doing the research, and how do people recognize that they have an insecure style?
Yeah, there are a few tests that you can do that
Okay.
can tell you this. One of I forget what it's called at the moment, but there's also one that has like paragraphs and people can kind of self-identify.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, one of the most common ones is an anxious attachment style, and the other common one is an avoidant attachment style. So let's see.
Tell me more about the anxious attachment style.
Yeah. So on the anxious side, that at deep down at a core level, I feel maybe not good enough.
Okay.
And I think my partner might leave me if I'm not perfect in some way, if I'm not skinny enough or pretty enough or make enough money or I was kind of using maybe that's more of a concern for females, body image and things, but
Men probably do that too.
Yeah, that's true.
yes, yeah, it does go both ways.
If I'm not muscular enough, or
Right.
Yeah.
men feel
Or
that.
if I'm not showing that I'm so strong enough or I can
And
protect
handsome.
her or whatever. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. What I hear a lot from men is, can I provide? Am I providing enough? Which
Is that society pressure that
I think
providing?
so.
Okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
No, Tina, you go for it.
No, no. I was just gonna say, not only it's society, but I think it's because, like you said early on when you were explaining it, the tribal, right? So the man,
Mhm.
just our image of what it was in prehistoric days, then including the Bible, where the Bible tells,
Yeah.
the man to be the provider. So I think it's just an interpretation that society has taken on that just kind of
Sure.
evolved to the man is supposed to provide. And if you can't, then you're a failure.
Right. Then you
Sort
would-
of like
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it still is pushed in our society now, just the way gender roles are people are socialized into gender roles through
Absolutely.
their families, through media, and the military. The military pushes a gender role as well for what it is supposed to be like to be a man and to be a strong man and to be a military person. Even when I work with women who are the service member of a couple, or if it's a dual military couple, it still is a very masculine environment with the more masculine value system that
Wow.
pushes that strong provider type of don't fail, don't be weak thing.
Yeah.
Ah.
So,
So do you find that because of that in the military, specifically dealing with military couples,
mhm.
that it's really hard to counsel them or help them because of that exterior? You don't be weak,
Weak,
because if you're setting your mind, I can't complain, I can't,
And you can't be vulnerable either.
or
really.
I can't talk about
Exactly.
my feelings. And
Right.
if we don't, because one, society doesn't talk about how to succeed as couples.
Right.
So we're really
Mhm.
not being taught what couples entail, how to succeed in being in relationships, and then making marriages last. But on top of that, now you have the pressure of being in the military and not showing weakness, whether you're male or female. So
Yeah.
do you find that's an extra barrier to go through?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. 100%. 100%. I feel like I'm often having to undo some of the acculturation that happens
Yes.
in the military to help couples be vulnerable with each other, because that's what marriage requires, right? It requires that I can be weak with my partner,
Right.
that they can be close
I-
to me.
I'm sure that's really hard.
Yeah, that's got to be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're supposed to be
So what
a
do
weak and a
couples?
leader.
Yeah.
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 I mean, yeah, you're supposed to be strong, not a, and a leader.
Right. So are they usually open to that? And I say that, let me make it more
Well,
clear.
let me say this. Is that one of the main barriers when you first sit down with a military couple, is to just get them to shed some of that strongness and leadershipness that they could, if that's such a word, that they could just be themselves in their relationship?
Yes. Yeah. It's maybe not the first conversation that I have,
Okay.
but it is always on my mind, because a lot of, especially with the military, even my time off is the military. Even my social life
right.
is the
Is the
military. And so it's a whole way of being in the world and thinking about the world, and I have to help them see how they can't place the same thought process for how they are with their friends and their workplace into the marriage, and then even with their kids, because right, I start with the marriage and then it trickles down
Go
to the
down to
kids,
the
but
kids.
often it it doesn't work for family relationships.
Okay. So
Yeah.
just curious. I know you're fascinated with the military because it's a
Mhm.
family thing. Did you think you were going to marry military? Or did you
Or
did
was
you
it
Ah,
strongly
I don't
suggested
know.
to you?
No,
Right.
it wasn't pushed, it wasn't pushed. I was just always drawn to the military. I had a couple of military partners before I met my husband that I dated, but it was never pushed on me, but I have lived in, uh, towns where there is a high
Okay.
military population. So when
Okay.
I did my undergrad, there was a huge army base there. There was an army base where I did my master's program, and so
Subconsciously you were
it's
you were
just
you were finding places that there were military bases. You were like,
yeah,
I'm
well,
gonna go
actually, I
not
tried
no
to join myself.
Oh, did you?
I tried to join the military myself as a therapist.
they didn't want you? Let me
It was
know.
a
I'm
little
gonna
more
send them.
complicated. So it was a little bit more complicated. They yeah, it's a longer story. It's just a longer story. They would
Okay.
probably take me now.
Okay.
Um, but at the time, I didn't have, um, the license that is
Right.
Oh,
required, and then
Okay.
okay.
when I had the license, I was already hired by the VA. So,
Okay.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So would you switch at this point?
You mean, like, go into being active duty in
Active,
the
Military.
yes,
military?
Yeah.
being active.
Yeah.
No, I've thought about it, and my husband and I have talked about it, but we, um, didn't want to be a dual military couple.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
yeah, if he ever gets out, then I might get in, but we'll see.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting.
So explain to us some of the things that you're finding in relationships and couples that you're actually helping them with, that if a military that if a military couple, if they're listening, or a military family, and because the pressures of the military brings its own added weight to the
Yes.
marriage. And if
Yes.
we're not knowing how to communicate or how to do these things, or even that we need to seek help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we think it's normal just to argue and not be happy in marriages. That's kind of
Yeah.
like, right? So,
Especially if that's what you've seen.
right. So,
Yeah.
or that's what people think. That's
Yeah.
what society thinks. After a few years, you're not going to be happy anyway. So this is
Right.
the
So,
most of
right.
marriage. So what are some of the things that you see that people can kind of be aware of? Just kind of tell us your whole works and how it can really help people, you know,
In
whether
and
they're
out of the military?
absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
That was a
Yeah.
lot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to figure out where's the best spot
Right,
to
right.
start.
I
Just jump
know.
in anywhere.
I'm so sorry.
Okay,
My thought
so
pattern, but
That's
go
that
ahead.
that's that 5 things going on in our head at one
5 things
time.
at the same time. I think the first thing, regardless of if you're military or non-military, is understanding that couples get into a cycle. There's sort of a system to our relationship and how we communicate, and it keeps itself going because all systems want homeostasis. So, um, the a really common one that really relates to a lot of fights is a criticize defend type of cycle. So if
Okay.
I get critical, then you get defensive. I take your defensiveness as critical, and then I get defensive, and now we're both in this defensive posture together. That's a
Okay.
Okay.
really common pattern,
Yes.
and that is a pattern that we want to change. And when you change that pattern, you can feel closer together and you can have a happier marriage because it's that pattern that's actually driving a wedge between the two people.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you,
You said you.
go ahead.
So you said when they can do what to the pattern?
Change the pattern.
So
Yeah.
how do we do that?
Yeah. So, so in this cycle, there are a couple of other cycles or patterns, but in this one, anger is kind of the primary emotion that is being expressed in this criticize, defend loop. Anger is usually a secondary emotion. It is possible for it to be a primary emotion, but it's usually a reaction to me feeling hurt or me feeling scared. So,
Or me feeling unloved?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the level of the conversation that couples have to get used to having, is saying, just now when you said that, I thought you were rejecting me and I felt really unloved. When I can switch to that conversation, that's when I can develop intimacy with my partner, when we can both talk on that level. And that's where the vulnerability piece comes back in. I have to be willing and able. Some people aren't quite yet able to
Absolutely.
even recognize their emotions or be able to talk about that. And that's how therapy can help. But willing and able to be vulnerable together in order to switch the conversation to that place.
So I noticed you said therapy. Is there a difference between therapy and counseling? Because you're not a counselor, right? You're a therapist?
Yeah, for most people it's interchangeable in our modern day.
Mhm.
There is a slight difference in the field.
Okay.
But for the public it's pretty interchangeable.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what are you seeing outside of the military couples for regular everyday couples? What is some of the main hurdles that they need to get over? Is it this first layer that you just mentioned about the whole communication? Is that the number one thing that people need to overcome?
I would say so, yeah. Every couple has a pattern. It's not always the criticize, defend pattern. Sometimes it's I'm trying to engage you and you shut down. And the more you shut down, the more I try to engage you. And the more I engage you, the more you shut down. That's a pattern. And some couples have where we're both sort of shut down and neither one of us is talking about issues that we feel are happening in the marriage. And that one is less common, but it just sort of, we grow more and more distant over time because nothing gets talked about. So figuring out what your pattern is probably the first step. And that can vary couple by couple, but pretty much every couple has a pattern.
And about how many patterns is it? Do you have like a number of different patterns that you can give that you work by, or is it just like you have a couple patterns and you either fall in A or B?
Those are the primary three.
Can you give them to me again?
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe we could say attack, which is this criticize, defend place.
Okay.
The second one is called pursue, withdraw, where I'm trying to engage you and you shut down. And then the other one is withdraw, where we're both kind of shut down, not talking about emotions.
Okay.
Those are the primary three.
So withdraw is you're in trouble because you going.
No one's talking.
Right. You're going in the opposite direction. Right.
So back to the military, because I know a lot of marriages, like you said, they're arguing over things that probably really don't pertain to their marriage. It's probably the stress of the job, right? So how do you get them to see or recognize that the anger or the anxiety or whatever's causing us to argue is not really about the marriage, but you're bringing it home? So is that an issue in kind of helping people recognize that, what are we really arguing about?
Yes. Yeah. And I think there are multiple layers to that. So anytime that I have a poor work-life balance, I pull resources from the marriage, sort of emotional resources from the marriage to handle my work stress. And that can lead to more tension and more kind of exhaustion in the marriage, and then more conflict and sort of like a push for something needs to change. And so that is an element of people needing to work on a work-life balance, which can be especially challenging in the military depending on your job. Another component of that is if there's untreated mental illness.
Okay.
So if there is an anxiety disorder or a depression or PTSD or something like that, that can mean that I'm maybe I'm more sensitive to something in my environment. I get triggered more easily, and so then even with my spouse, I get triggered more easily than I would if that wasn't happening. And then I would say there is a component where it is still about the relationship. So if I'm arguing about the dishes or the laundry or something like that, everybody argues about these things, right?
Right.
Well, I'm sure you don't, right? You guys just got married 2019.
Yeah.
Like
we did get married in 2019. Yeah, no, we argue. The dishes are a sensitive subject for me, and we argue about the dishes.
Really?
Well, join the club.
So you guys didn't get that straight before you said I do, huh? Who's gonna do the dishes?
Yeah, no. See, this is a good example of what I mean. So, like that is a real sensitive spot for me based off of my childhood with my family.
See, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, and so now in my marriage, I see dishes and I start getting anxious.
Really? Okay.
Yes, because of how I grew up and the dishes situation. And so then I get more irritable, which then of course comes off as critical, right? And now we're in this pattern, but it's more about my anxiety when I see the dishes. Mm-hmm.
Recognizing what's your trigger.
What's your trigger?
So I know we had a specialist on that was talking about several different layers about healing from childhood wounds. Right? Healing from your childhood, whereas your parents playing a part in the type of relationship that you have, or even not really recognizing what some of our triggers are, like you said, but the dishes for you, for one, okay.
Oh yeah.
So the dishes were not an issue for him. Is that
right? He
doesn't have any problem leaving them in the sink, does he?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
He feels very comfortable with them.
I don't see what the problem might be. So I don't know.
But I say that because then it leads to the other thing that Jason and I talk about, which is like talking about marriage before you get married, right? So our idea of marriage is, I've found a mate. Yes. We're going to be happy. We're never going to argue. Nothing's going to bother me. And then you get married and then you realize we're arguing over dishes, right? Which is part of the let's talk about marriage topic that we're talking about. Trying to get couples to understand that the happily ever after only happens if we're doing something towards the happy.
Right.
Right?
Because we're all triggered by something. And I know it's funny that you mentioned the dishes.
We all have childhood wounds.
We do.
And we all have extensions of our parents or things that we may not have understood as a child that we're now carrying into our relationships as an adult.
Yep.
Right? So how do you tell them to get that balance? I know you talk about work, home, family balance. What are you telling people, how are you helping couples to relate with that balance?
Yeah. So I think if I could backtrack slightly to what you said about kind of talking about this before you get married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sometimes it's really hard for couples to know, even when they're very intentional. A lot of couples aren't intentional. They never have conversations like this. But a lot of them are very intentional and they may try to have conversations, but it's hard to know what triggers might come up until you face them.
Right.
So I think one of my favorite things for couples to try to have this balance is to do a regular relationship check-in meeting where they cover different aspects of their relationship. So whether that's the quality time, like how are you feeling about quality time? How am I feeling? That could be around finances, which is a big,
Yes.
another conflict point.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Sex also is another conflict point.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
and parenting. So we,
Just
go
life.
through
Just
the
much
list.
just
Yeah,
throw
you,
the whole life in
you
it.
hit all of the pain points.
Right,
here. Go
right,
on.
right. Kids,
Right.
money,
Yes.
sex.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
hmm
So having, my husband and I, we do it monthly. So just where we like sit down and we go through all of these areas and we see how we're both feeling. If there's something we want to do differently, like right now we're experimenting with a chore chart.
Are the dishes at the top of that chore chart?
Well, yeah, we are experimenting.
So let me ask you this: when you guys were dating, did you go over to his place and see the dishes, and then you clean them up? Like how? And I ask that because how do dating? What did you see as a pattern that he did that didn't bother you then? That now bothers you?
His standard of cleanliness was different than mine.
Okay.
And I knew that from the beginning.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
Right.
wonderful.
I knew that from the beginning. Yeah. And he, there are areas where he's really great at. And then
I'm
other
sure
areas
you're
where he's
married
not
to him.
great at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would hate to say that he's terrible all the way across the board, and then you still married him.
Yeah. No, even in cleanliness, like some
Mhm.
areas he's stronger at than others.
Right.
Sure.
So again, going back to when you dated him, what were your thoughts if things weren't as tidy as you would have liked when you came over? And I'm going somewhere with this. I know you're thinking.
Well, I guess my first reaction is this is kind of gross. That would have been my initial reaction to this.
Liz, I hope.
Yeah.
What's your husband's name?
Justin.
Hope Justin doesn't watch this episode. I'm just saying. He's gonna turn and go, really, Liz? Gross. So I say that because part of being real in relationships, to me, in a marriage, is that we actually recognize the things that we were willing to overlook while dating.
Yes.
But now it's an issue in marriage. And it's not, you just gave the perfect example. But my point in that is kind of expressing to people that when you say I do, the marriage part, that's when life kind of gets real. Right? So you're together, and now the things that were gross, we now have to tackle because when we were dating,
that was your issue.
Or we were willing to overlook it because we weren't married. So we don't, as you said, we don't really talk about those things prior to marriage. And I think if we kind of be a little bit more upfront and honest while the dating, hey, how are you going to do this if we get married?
Yeah.
Just kind of trying to eliminate some issues.
Or just say what's some of the things that trigger you. Like, this is my pet peeve. I don't like when you do this, or this kind of bothers me when you do that. But we don't really have those conversations. If it's not too, I'll say this, if it's not too bad, you'd be like, I don't want to bring it up because the relationship is going good. We're moving in the right direction. I don't want to be saying, well, you know what? I really don't like the way you do this.
Or I guess I'm really trying to say is that sometimes we have, not you and Justin, not at all. I'm not talking about you guys, but sometimes we have issues because we think in our minds once we get married, those issues that we have dating are not going to be an issue.
All right, yeah.
So we're kind of sugarcoating them, and then once we get married, he's not going to do this anymore, and he or she's not going to do that, and then it becomes more of a trigger point because it's something that has always bothered you, but you were willing to overlook it in the dating phase. Now you're married, and it has become an issue. So I guess I'm just trying to get couples to understand that some of these trigger points in marriages, if we tackle them right, and I think that's a good point. Like Jason said, a lot of people don't want to rock the boat because they're afraid, well, if I tell them, then we won't get married, then we will break up. But that just makes a stronger marriage to me.
Yes. Yeah. And even that is a sign of insecurity. I'm scared to assert my wants and needs because I'm afraid you won't really be there for me if I share what is going on inside.
Wonderful connection. Okay.
Yeah. And it gets even more complicated sometimes with military couples. Like, so with me and my husband, we met when I was working in Pensacola at the VA, and
Okay.
we, I don't know, dated like something like 9 months or something. And then he moved here to Virginia, and we were
Okay.
long distance for a year and a half, maybe, before I moved here. And so even that, I'd come visit every month, or he would come visit me, but he would always clean, before I got there.
He had a whole month, right?
Yeah, he had a
I'll
whole
be
month
there
to
next
clean.
week.
And yeah, so I mean,
Smart man.
yes. So also, this is something that is pretty common for
Yes.
military
Yes.
couples before they get married to be long distance for a period of time.
Okay.
And that makes it more challenging because things are not always, you don't see everybody in their day-to-day
Right.
life as much when
Yes.
when you're visiting like
Right.
that. Mhm.
So I know I was speaking with a young couple not too long ago, and I was telling them, me personally, I'm against living with someone before you get married, right?
Yeah.
And the reason has nothing to do. My point is that because of like what you said, now you guys are going over the chore list. My reasons for saying that is that when you live with someone, you get to see their in and outs, and you may decide not to marry them afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like when you get married, it should be a journey of discovery. Right?
Yeah,
So,
I like
right?
that idea.
So, but if you live with them, then it becomes,
Yep. All your dirty laundry is right out there.
yeah, you get
Yep,
to
you
know
see
it. You don't
everything.
like it, or before you get married, you've already established that pattern, right? That we
Yes.
have to then get rid of. Whereas I think if you're married, you may work on it a little bit more as opposed to if you're dating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. I want to touch on one thing. I want to talk
I
on.
think she was going to say something,
Oh,
but
okay.
you have something to say, Liz.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, yeah, so there is research to support what you're talking about, Tina, because but it really comes down to, is the commitment to the relationship there? So even for
Okay.
couples who don't get married, but they are committed to each other, then that's fine. They can navigate that and living together. But it's the couples who aren't committed, who are like, this is a trial run to see if we want to get married. Those are the ones
that's probably what it is on some of them, right?
Yes,
Yep.
for a lot of couples it is. And that tends to not go well for eventually getting married. It's
Okay.
better to have the commitment to each other and then navigate it, because couples are less likely to really problem solve together and be wanting
Right.
to improve things if the commitment
Absolutely.
level's not there.
Exactly. And I think, that's kind of what I say. I think part of marriage is kind of learning each other.
Yep. That's the fun part.
Yeah, fun.
Navigating life
fun,
together.
Fun, but not so fun.
Well, you know what? If you're
Right.
into it for the long haul, if you really want to get into your marriage and really
I think
discover it, and well, you know what? People get married for various different reasons, right? They
That
get married
is
because
true.
they're supposed to get married, because society says that you're supposed to get married so you can start a family and all this other stuff.
And have no clue about what marriage
Exactly.
is all about.
And I'm not really into the other person. Look, I'm married, I'm committed, it's legal. I'm done. That's it. Where people are invested in their marriage and want to see it prosper and want to really dive into it and see how they can make it better. But I want to talk on workplace stressors,
Okay.
namely combat. How
Yeah.
do military families deal with a loved one in combat and still try to keep the family together? That's got to be. I mean,
even
that's
being away,
Yeah.
right?
yeah. Really being deployed. Wow.
While they're deployed or after they've come back and they've experienced combat.
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Both.
Whichever one you want to tackle.
Right.
Both are hard.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. Yes.
Both are
yes.
hard in their own way. I mean, yeah, I guess I have lots of thoughts. So during deployment, it's really normal for the family to feel very anxious about
Yes.
their service member being gone and being deployed, and even more so if they are in a combat area.
Yes.
And that is, I guess, again, I'm a therapist or a counselor, and obviously I'm biased. I think it's the best thing in the world. And I think that could be helpful, but I do have to find a way to calm myself, manage my anxiety, and to navigate that while they're gone.
Mhm.
And it's normal for everybody when the partner comes back to experience stress. There's like an initial honeymoon phase, but the family
Right.
has been used to functioning without the other
Other
person.
person. Yes.
So now
Okay.
they have to reorganize their entire routine to make room for the spouse to
Join back
participate
in.
again in
Yeah.
all
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
family activities. So that is a normal stressor for pretty much every military couple coming back from deployment. Now, if they have experienced combat, not everybody has PTSD, but they may
Mm-hmm.
have um, an initial period. So when anybody experiences a traumatic event, whatever it is, they experience the symptoms of PTSD for a short period of time. A lot of people naturally recover, but that is the normal response to a traumatic event. It's
Okay.
when they have difficulty recovering. It's kind of like grief in a way.
Yeah.
If
Right.
Okay.
it's
Okay.
prolonged,
Right.
if it's prolonged and they can't sort of move on, then it becomes PTSD.
Okay.
And that is where PTSD is completely treatable. Um, the research and the science that we have on treating PTSD at this point, nobody needs to live with PTSD anymore.
Okay.
The treatments are so strong for it.
Wonderful.
Not that it's not still a horrible thing that you had to
Right.
experience, but you don't have to have the nightmares, the anxiety in public places, the depression, all of that can be worked on.
So, how do you get couples to actually actively participate? Because it's a stigma around it. People think that getting therapy or getting counseling is a negative thing, or they don't realize that we really have an issue in our marriage. So, how do you get people to actively, you know, seek it out? You know,
Yeah, well, this is another reason why I wanted to do couples counseling because
okay.
with military, because a lot of the military members, they won't go to therapy because of the stigma, but
Right.
they might go to
Exactly.
couples counseling, which is a little more acceptable than individual
Okay.
therapy in the military, right?
Okay.
They're, again, that kind of more very family oriented culture for the military.
It's not me.
Hmm.
It takes the pressure off saying I need help as
Yes.
opposed to well we're just going to okay.
Yeah,
So
and it
is
can be a good intro to therapy. And then if I think something more is going on, I have the ability to address it within the couple and discuss it with them.
Okay.
so how do you bring about the awareness? Because I think part of couples suffering or um not really living to the full potential of being a couple is not knowing where to go or what to do or if we should. So how do you make it, make people more aware of it or what are you doing to promote it? I guess I'm trying to ask.
Yeah,
In the military.
in the military. Yeah, I think that is a challenge. It's a challenge overall that I think uh, is just facing the military and military families on a more personal level. What I'm trying to do is I have my podcast,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I really started that because I wanted to help couples who maybe their partner is like, "No, I'll never go to counseling,"
Right,
Okay.
so then
exactly,
I
exactly.
they can get something, but also because there aren't very many couple therapists who are really specializing in working with the military, and there's only one of me. So so if I have my podcast, I can share it with
Reach more.
people. Yeah, and I know there
Mhm.
are a lot of people who, so one of the things for therapists is I can't work with anybody who is in my circle. So anybody
Okay.
who works with my husband, I can't work
You
with any
can't
of
work with.
them.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know a lot of them listen to my podcast and they like it and they're finding it helpful. So,
Wonderful.
Good.
yeah. So that is what I'm trying to do, and then in the next couple of like, probably next year, in the next 2 years, I'm gonna be focusing more on doing couple workshops because while maybe maybe because of the stigma of counseling, that may be too big of a barrier.
Right. You're right.
But a workshop is more acceptable.
Right.
Or going on a couples retreat, which is another thing that I'm going to try to work on for military families. It's a way of working on the relationship, but also kind of like a vacation type of thing to feel more, just a lower barrier to entry, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So back to the chores list. So how are you guys? You thought you were gone, right? I was like, oh, darn it. So how are we working through that? And I'm using that as a good example because if we put ourselves out there to let people know, hey, because nobody's perfect.
No.
Right.
Everybody's going through something.
Once we get inside in front of the camera, it's one thing. But once we turn it off, there's going to be issues because we're people, we're human, we're each an individual. So trying to just help couples kind of, okay, let's
you're not the only one going through dishes.
Yeah, let's take this one problem one day at a time. So how are you guys, what is helpful in you tackling? Because it may be dishes for you. It may be clothes or plate for somebody else.
Plate. I thought we were going to get past the podcast without you mentioning the plate, but we can't get past. See, when you said dishes, I knew right away that plate going to come up because I got a bad habit of leaving a plate on the way to the garbage can. It doesn't make it to the garbage can. So
the garbage can is here.
Yeah.
The plate is right here, like literally. So even it's so funny, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I just like to tease them with it.
Right.
But so it's gonna be some type of issue. So how are we tackling that one thing at a time?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So for us, what we're doing, we experiment. So in our monthly meetings, we come up with a plan, but then when we have the next meeting, we talk about, is this working or not? Do we want to modify it? So currently around the dishes, it's that every night before we go to bed, dishes go in the dishwasher and we can run it if it's full. And then in the morning, one of us will empty it. That's one thing that we're trying right now.
So is it one of us or do we have assignment? Like you were supposed to take the dishes out. No, I thought you were going to do it. So is it an assigned who takes it out?
Well, I took them out 3 mornings in a row.
Right. It's usually me. I'm fine with taking them out, but if I'm in a rush, he'll do it. And we're also using a block schedule. So we have sort of a calendar that says this day these chores are done. This day, these chores are done. This day, these chores are done. And we've divided them between us. So that is the other thing we're experimenting with right now. On a more personal level, like on an individual level, it's me recognizing that it's my trigger, that it's not my husband being lazy. It's not him out to get me and make my life miserable.
Right.
He's not a bad guy. It's my trigger. So me working on my own stuff that comes up and trying to have more compassion. And what you talked about, Tina, you tease Jason now about the dish. That's where couples want to get to, is where they can have humor around that. That's a sign of the Gottmans. At the Gottman Institute do a lot of research on couples, and sort of like the master couples can have a lot of humor around these types of differences.
Yes.
But it just takes time to get there.
Yes. But it was something you said, just owning your own stuff though. Yes. I think that's the biggest issue, that people don't stop each individual. I know I always say, I like to put myself in the other person's shoes. So if something is bothering me, I have to stop and say, okay, really, why is it bothering me? Is it what this person really did? Or is it something within me that it's making it bigger than what it should be? So I think owning our own stuff, and first of all, recognizing it. Lots of times
that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, we don't want to put our name on our bad laundry, right?
Nope.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you think about that when couples can't communicate because neither one of them are actually owning it up? And so the communication lines are really blocked because, as you said, those patterns. So I'm not hearing you whether I'm getting defensive, or I'm shutting down, or I'm just not dealing with it? How do we reopen something really simple and easy that couples can do to just try to open back up those lines of communication?
Yeah. Well, I guess self-reflection is sort of the first thing, because
Okay.
I can't change my relationship if I don't recognize my part in it and
Okay.
recognize what gets triggered inside of me. Because when
Okay.
I get triggered, if I react defensively, like it's a push-pull. If I react this way, it will pull for my partner to respond to me that in a
Absolutely.
defensive way. And so yeah, it is hard to that is a hard thing, right? How do you get someone who doesn't self-reflect to self-reflect?
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I guess, when they end up in my office, I can talk about, "Oh, do you guys see this pattern?" It's
Yeah.
and I can kinda
And
help them with it
do you ever hear a couple say, well, I'm not doing anything, it's all
So,
her?
yep.
all the
Yeah. Or it's
time.
all him.
All the time.
All the time.
Because we're fine. It's the other person.
Right. I don't have
Yeah.
an issue with it. She's
Yes.
always complaining, or she's always nitpicking, or, so what do you tell them?
Yeah, well, my first step is to help them understand that it's a cycle, that
Okay.
that they what they do is pulling for that response from their partner. So the thing that they don't like about their partner is also in reaction to them. They are part of the reason their partner is doing what they're doing, and that can be a hard pill
Right.
to swallow sometimes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But that is a really important part. Yeah, I think most people who are uh, not everybody, but a lot of people who are coming to therapy who are reading books, listening to podcasts, this podcast included, are probably in the self-reflection camp.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, those who are not so much interested in self-reflection, I'm not really sure
How to reach them, huh?
yeah.
So I know you're still early in your marriage. So you guys got married in 2019. So you just made 2 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, 2020 was a
Right?
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
2020,
she's
2021. Wait,
she's
nice.
fantastic in science.
Yeah.
I noticed when she said we're not working. It's like they have this science marriage. Let's go through a hypothesis, and then we're going to try to do this. So I see you're very science oriented, but math, I don't know. I thought they were related, but your math skills may need
My
a little
math
work.
skills are horrible. Yeah, I'm not good. This is my weakest thing. Yeah.
I can tell, like 2 years. She's like, "You sure?"
Well, we'll see. Yeah, and I had to just remind her, 2020 did happen. It was
Right.
an actual year.
That's the problem. Like that
Yes.
2020 is such a. It's
Fog.
like a do we really count that type of thing?
Hey, we didn't do anything, so does it count?
Because the last time you remember doing something, right, was in 2019, and you're like, is it 2 years already?
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
Okay.
all of time is kind of a blur in the last couple of years.
And thank God that we're not back on lockdown again, because it would kind of be.
Oh, that would be detrimental.
It would be kind of like
that would be tough.
the headspace that we would be in,
Yeah.
especially young people. But my point in saying that is that, so I know you're still early in your marriage, and you guys are still going through the hypothesis phase, right? Is this working? Can we prove this theory? Right? So, but what is your take on happily married? Do you think that couples can be happy and married, or do we have to choose?
No, absolutely, couples can be happy and married. Yeah, that comes from security. That
Okay.
comes from feeling secure with my partner, knowing that I'm loved, knowing that they accept me, that they care, that they respect me. And that is the main goal of the first few years of marriage. That's when those patterns are being developed, if they weren't developed when you were dating. But that's also when I really kind of figure out, do I feel secure with you or not? And if I can build security, then that is where that happens. That's how how I can have a happy, healthy, long-lasting marriage is based off of building security in the relationship.
And if they don't have it, where should they start?
Yeah, it would require couples counseling for sure, just because
Okay.
that tends to be really hard for people to try to do on an individual basis. But Bowlby, who was John Bowlby, he's like the father maybe of attachment theory and attachment science.
Okay.
He talked about how attachment bonds are dynamic and they're fluid and they can change over time. So
Okay. Absolutely.
If I'm coming in with a more anxious or avoidant style and I have secure interactions with my partner, I can move into a secureness with them in our marriage. And vice versa. Like if I have the more conflict, then the more we're critical, it can go the other way. I can lose security. The biggest ways people lose security are maybe like affairs and types of things that are really clearly relationship injuries. But just like I can lose security, I can gain security. And it takes a few years of having a secure interactions to build security. But it is dynamic and it can be created.
Fantastic. And so for those, one more question. Do you have any questions? I know I'm kind of.
No, you just killing the question category. Go ahead, baby. You got a lot of questions.
Okay, all right.
Well, ask all the questions because I want my relationship to stay strong, baby. Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. So, for the couples out there that, you have one mate that absolutely does not want counseling or therapy, or the fear of other people knowing
what's going on.
People have that huge fear. So what should a mate do? Because, okay, you say, let's get counseling. They say no.
Right.
And then you say, well, maybe you should listen to this podcast. They's like, I don't listen to podcasts.
Right.
So, how do we get the one couple, even though they're owning their own, the one person in that relationship who really wants to work on it, to kind of influence their mate?
Yeah. So again, it is a push-pull. So let's say, there are books I could recommend. There's like an online workshop I could recommend. But if we're talking about a couple where one partner is saying, I'm not going to do anything, nothing.
Yeah, that's right. So we do have a lot of those because
I'm fine. I'm not the problem.
They don't see, or they don't see the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's a system. I may never get to the level of security that is optimal. But it doesn't mean that I can't have significant improvement, and that even working on myself. So if I can recognize, okay, I get critical when I feel hurt, then I can start working on that, and I can go to my partner, and instead of getting critical, I can say, okay, just now I felt really hurt. The more I can do that will, it pulls for a different response from my partner. Because absolutely. I'm not good at getting critical, they'll respond differently, and we can change our pattern that way.
It's hard for people to change themselves.
It is. But do you have, you mentioned some books as far as reference. Do you have a couple that you could give the audience?
Yeah. So Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson is probably the number one book that I would tell people to read.
Okay.
Hold Me Tight. Okay.
That one is designed for couples to read and kind of together, and there's discussion questions at the end of every chapter, and it helps you recognize what cycle you might be in. For people who are really interested in the science behind it, there's a book called Love Sense, also by Dr. Sue Johnson, that would really go into the science behind attachment.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, and there are Hold Me Tight workshops based on the book, which is, all of this is based on the type of couple therapy that I do, which is emotionally focused couple therapy. And there are, people all over the country host these workshops, but there is also like a recorded online version for people who didn't want to be in a group setting.
Wonderful. So before we get out of here, what's the one major advice that you would give couples? Whether it's from your personal experience, whether it's from science, right? So something that is really tangible that you think is
a good starting point.
Like a major gym.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I have two?
Absolutely. Sure, go ahead.
You're an overachiever.
Right.
Look at you.
Yeah. She can't stand the box of one. Right. I think they're connected.
Yeah.
It's that science behind it. They never do things in ones. No.
Yeah. So I think the relationship meetings are really important because it gives
wonderful
a chance for us to talk about things that we might want to avoid talking about naturally. And it can help me practice being more vulnerable about topics like sex or money without me having to face that fear of bringing up the topic myself in the middle of dinner or something, right?
Right. So, absolutely.
So I think that would be it. And then the second one would be, I guess it's a multi-phase one, pausing to self-reflect on my emotions and then trying to communicate from a more vulnerable place. Okay. And that one is a little bit harder, takes more time to do. But that'll change the cycle. It'll change the dynamic.
I think so too.
And we just we're just trying to change the response that we get from our spouse. So
change the whole dynamics of the relationship so that we can kind of interact better. So we understand we're actually coming from a place of love instead of hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic.
But the way I react, it's going to pull a different response from my mate. If I want a different response, I need to actually respond or interact with them differently. If I interact with them with more love, then I'm going to get a more loving and understanding response from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the plate.
About the plate. I'm glad you got over that plate, baby.
Yeah. But that's those are some awesome. This is a wonderful conversation. We have definitely enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it.
And and hopefully we can have you on again as you do more research and as we progress in your relationship, things that you may learn and want to share with us in the audience. We definitely will invite you back on again.
Yeah,
but I think that wraps up another You have more questions?
No, she got to give me all the ways that all this good information she's given us. How do our listeners find out more about you? Podcast, website, Instagram, all that stuff. How do they
tell us all about Liz?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, so there's a lot there. So I have my podcast, which is really geared for military relationships, the Communicate and Connect podcast. It's communicateandconnectpodcast.com. Kind of simple.
Okay.
I am on social media at Liz Polinsky. Pick your social media, and that's where I'm at. And then I do provide counseling. Right now, I can provide counseling to anybody in Arkansas, South Carolina, or Virginia. And so, and I'm in person. So that would be telehealth. Obviously, if someone's in Arkansas, I'm not located there right now. I'm physically in Virginia. So if someone wanted like an in-person counseling service, I'm at the Relationship Center in East Beach, Norfolk, Virginia. So
wonderful. Wow. So let me ask you one last question before we get out of here. Your relationship podcast, is it just for married couples or is it for people who may be in a relationship?
People in a relationship. I try to cover military relationships as a whole. So like right now I'm doing kind of a series on premarital, like getting ready for marriage. And then I'll probably do a section on like new parenthood and then kind of like taking us through the life cycle for in the developmental stages for a military couple. But yeah, so it's anything military relationships. It is geared more towards couples, but I do cover things like parenting, but more so on how the couple can be a team in that area than so much focusing on how to deal with kids or.
Okay, got you. Well, this has been wonderful.
Yes, it has.
I think that wraps up another episode. And as always, we're in it to win it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Lovin' Beyond the I Do podcast. Head over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Legendary Relationship, or visit our website at legendaryrelationship.com. Till next time, remember to make every day count.